before I begin anything else. Um, let's get into what we're going to talk about. There's a lot to talk about, but we'll talk about this fantasy fight here, Mayweather versus Crawford. Who wins and why? And I put up this post in Bucket Podcast last month, and I got so many different responses. I thought I would show you guys some of the different responses that came out, and then I'll give you my response to those responses afterwards. And then we'll look at, of course, Terrence Bud Crawford and some of the new news that is coming out of him. You know, he just recently visited Turkey Al Sheikh, so we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll also talk about the Popo, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Okay, so let's just get into it. So when I put this question out there last month, Mayweather versus Crawford, of course, not an actual fight, and this is Money Mayweather. This is not Pretty Boy Floyd. This is Money Mayweather fighting Terrence Crawford. These were the responses by fans, and some of y'all don't like the questions. And so we have the range of different responses. So Andre Lewis, he said Bud by KO. I told him nope. I don't see that ever happening. Bud would not knock out Floyd. Andre Lewis also said Bud can do everything Floyd does: box, counterpunch, make adjustments. Yet motherfuckers make it out like only Floyd can think in there, and that's not true. Nobody's saying no to those things, obviously. It's just that Floyd is such a defensive genius that I just can't see Terrence Crawford knocking him out. I mean, the guy is just very much so defensively responsible. So that's the last thing I expect to happen in a fight with Bud versus Floyd. So that's why I said it's not true. I'm not saying that Bud won't win or Floyd won't win. All right. Nobody's ever beaten Floyd. Nobody's ever beaten Bud. So it's a very, very, it's a great question. That's why I asked. Okay. And you had a series of responses to that, and we'll go through some of them. Molly Mack said, Andrew Lewis, what did Floyd do to you? So he took it personally for some reason. And Andrew Lewis said, the post is about a fantasy mashup, dum dum. Molly Mack said, Andrew Lewis, your moms didn't hug you enough. Wow. This guy just went super personal. You're too upset to talk about Floyd on here way too much. God bless you, boy. Andrew Lewis says, you're lame. Okay, so this just decayed into, um, you know, personal attacks on each other. So I won't waste my time with that. Okay. Andrew Lewis, again, he says something. He says, Bud Southpaw stance will neutralize that shell. Zab Judah knocked Floyd on his ass with a counter hook, catching Floyd coming in. Floyd reached for the right hand lead. Judah caught him. Bud would capitalize on that. Floyd did make an adjustment in that fight, though. And Zab Judah was just way quicker than Floyd. Terrence Crawford is not quicker than Floyd. So if we are addressing the actual issue that this guy is talking about, and then Floyd's never really had problems with southpaws. He'd been hit equally as much by southpaws as he has been hit by orthodox fighters. So I get Andre Lewis's point. He's trying to say that Bud could be a southpaw, he could be orthodox, he could switch up in there. But again, Floyd has a chin, and then two, you catch Floyd with something, you're not going to catch him again with that thing. Very unlikely, because he's going to make an adjustment. So that's a cool thing to say, but is it exactly something that would actually happen? I don't know. Tonka Harvey said, Andre Lewis, Floyd is still a kid then too. You don't think boxers learn from their mistakes? Also, he's saying that, Floyd at that time, he was still developing as a fighter. Okay. Floyd was 29 years old when he faced Judah, which I brought up. He was in his prime, basically. Angela says, yeah, a kid. Fuck out of here. So he wasn't a kid. Tonka Harvey says, Andre Lewis, 29, is still a kid. No, it's not. How many boxing greats you've seen take some mean shots and knockdowns and made adjustments and still came out victorious? Angela says blocked. Angela is 28. Oh, yeah, Floyd was 28. Yep. So I responded to him. He never responded to me. Floyd never really had problems with switch hitters or southpaws, to be honest. Cotto, by the way, was a switch hitter. I don't think a lot of people know that. He would switch once he got you hurt and land his left hand as a backhand. Floyd got hit equally by southpaws and orthodox fighters. Zab was way quicker and more explosive than Crawford as well. And while Floyd did get caught by Zab multiple times early, what happened afterwards? He adjusted and then proceeded to beat the brakes out of the bigger, longer, more powerful, faster, quicker Judah. Remember, he almost stopped Zab, who low-blowed him to stop him from pressing for the KO. So I just kind of mentioned that point right there. So Andrew Lewis is on a tear. He's just like going in. Motherfuckers don't want to see Floyd challenge and buy into the bullshit that he can't be defeated. Bud whooped Bud would whoop Floyd's ass. They'll say some retarded shit like, "Oh, he wasn't ready or he was hurt." Fuck out of here with that. So he truly beat Floyd, and he's like 100% sure about that. Maybe, but it ain't that deep. Neither Bud nor Floyd ever were defeated. Bud not KOing Floyd. Bud would knock Floyd the fuck out. Mosley at 38 years old hurt Floyd. Bud would follow up and get the stoppage. You're delusional, man. No one's getting killed in that fight. Them boys too good. Too good a defense for that shit. Andrew Lewis, he knocked him out. He dropped him. You open and praying for them to have a puncher's chance. What happened afterwards? Boy, be quiet. And he said, "Shut up, nigga." As if he knows me. I said, nah. Nah, son. Bud would knock this motherfucker out in round 10. I'll bet money on it. See, he's very sure that Bud would knock out Floyd, which I just don't see happening. But hey, I hear him. I'll tell you why he's saying this. This is my additional thoughts into it. Bud knocked out everybody at welterweight. Once he was at welterweight, he was knocking everybody out. So I can see his strength and power. The strength and power Bud had was greater than most welterweights out there. I could see why, he would think that Bud would knock out Floyd. But once again, Floyd has faced guys that'll just be mowing down everybody. He's faced powerful boxers and all of that. Again, Floyd is not a guy like he doesn't have a chin. One, two. It's interesting that he mentioned Shane Mosley. Now, you guys go look this up. When Floyd faced Shane Mosley was 5'9". Okay. They didn't give his reach. They gave his arm length. But you can find his reach in the first fight versus Oscar De La Hoya. So you go HBO on YouTube and you look it up. Shane Mosley had a 74-inch reach. Guess what dimensions Bud is? Bud is 5'9", and he has a 74-inch reach. So Shane Mosley in dimensions, not in style of fighting, not in stance, but in terms of dimensions, Shane Mosley is exactly the size and dimensions of Terrence Bud Crawford. And remember, Shane Mosley was able to fight at 154 as well as fight at 147. In fact, Shane Mosley went as far as to fight at 160. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Shane Mosley actually went all the way up to 168. He had a fight with Ricardo Mayorga later on in his career at 168. So all I'm saying is, Shane Mosley literally is, like, in terms of dimensions and capacity, power, Bud has a lot of power as well. In terms of all those things, Shane Mosley matches Terrence Bud Crawford in terms of the physical attributes. Okay? He literally matches Terrence Bud Crawford. But what happened in that fight with Shane Mosley and Floyd? You keep on talking about, Shane Mosley caught him with the right hand twice. Yeah, but he didn't even drop Floyd. Like, he buzzed him. He didn't drop him. You know what I mean? And that's an important point. Now, people are thinking that Terrence is a great finisher, and that might be so. But even if Terrence was to stun Floyd, the way how Floyd clinched up on Mosley didn't have no room to throw anything, And I can't see, if Floyd slides into you and starts locking you up, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I don't know if there's too many defensive methods Floyd has in his tool bag to get stopped by anybody. Far less get beaten by anybody, get touched by anybody. Now, I remember Chop Chop Coley touched Floyd. That was Pretty Boy, though. Chop Chop hurt him. Marcus McDonough hurt him a little bit, buzzed him a little bit. Marcus McDonough didn't let up. He just kept coming, right? I remember Miguel Cotto hurt him. Who else has hurt him? Mosley. Who else? Trying to think of somebody else that actually touched him up. Ricky Hatton hurt him. And these guys just keep coming. right? And they know how to finish. So I'm not really of the persuasion that Terrence Bud Crawford could knock out Floyd. I just don't see it. That ain't no easy work. Floyd ain't no easy work. You're going 12 rounds with that dude. And you're going 12 hard rounds with that dude. Because it's to touch him first, and then the next thing is to, you know, to try and finish him. If you're going for a KO against Floyd, you're not gonna get it. You're not gonna get it. He's not gonna give you them shots like that. You gotta try and outpoint him. Um, Bud would knock this motherfucker out around round 10. I'll bet money on it. I don't bet Floyd pot shot and shell defense, pull counter. That ain't cutting it here. That shit works on basic fighters. Bud ain't basic. He's multi-layered with skill. I mean, I don't know about the knockout part. That's what I'm saying. You're either trolling or intellectually challenged. Floyd is almost 51. Okay. So this dude, these are some of the people out there who are saying, well, Floyd's almost 50. We're talking a fantasy fight, my friend. I telling me you're too abusive with these people. You stop. You can't be that. This is a fantasy fight. So this is another guy thinking that we're talking about an actual fight. Some guy says Canelo. Here's another guy again repeating the fact that this is a fantasy fight we're talking about. Floyd is retired. Kyra Iverson again says Bud by KO. I said absolutely not. That ain't happening. Leaning Bud due to reach only. I'm not sure which version of Floyd can win or makes the better fight, and I don't think money can be knocked out. But Pretty Boy could get knocked out. Um, I don't think any version of Floyd gets knocked out. That's the truth. That's the one thing I'm pretty sure about. I don't see Terrence Crawford knocking out Floyd. Um, but Bud winning, it's possible, like I said before, and it has nothing to do with reach. I mean, Shane Mosley, like I just said, had the same dimensions. He had longer reach than Floyd. That meant absolutely nothing. Floyd was still able to goad him into getting counterpunched with the pull counter off of the shell defense. So I don't see all of that. Reach and all these things, reach and height and strength and power having anything to do with how the fighter is going to win the fight. Not even speed. None of those things. Time and beat speed. DB Edwards says why? I should answer him. Why not? Bud is probably the smartest fighter since Mayweather. Both men analyze your mistakes and make you pay. The big difference is Bud's power made making mistakes way more devastating. Bud was knocking you out. Floyd, as he got older, his hands got more brittle, so he wasn't knocking you out. True, but again, I mean, I don't think these guys understand. Bud ain't knocking out Floyd. Whether he makes a mistake or not, he not knocking him out. Floyd had a hell of a chin. Plus, he knows what to do when he gets hurt. So that's not even a thing in this fight. This fight is going 12 rounds. The question is, who gonna win it? You know, who's gonna win it? Um, I don't think Bud's power has anything to do with this fight. This is about smarts. This is about IQ. This is about what has Bud learned about Floyd, and can he implement that? Is Floyd going to change his game up? Is he going to, take his game to another level and show Bud something Bud hasn't seen before? That's the if those two were to match up, hypothetically, because neither of them have been beaten by anybody in their era. So you have to look at it, and they beat the best of their era. So you got to look at, you know, who's gonna make the adjustments first? Who's going to take that game to another level? Um, and that very readily can be Floyd. It could very readily be Bud. We probably haven't seen the best of Bud either. So it's a very intriguing fight. DM Meadow says nobody cares. Well, if nobody cares, you would not comment it. Assuming Floyd is in his prime, then Mayweather wins. We're talking offense versus defense. Bud versus Canelo was the only time Bud played catch and shoot. Mayweather mastered. No, that's not true at all. That's just not true at all. Mayweather mastered that. Crawford wouldn't be able to be effective. His only advantage is strength and his ability to close the distance by switching hands. But even still, he's no Marvin Hagler who could cut off half the ring by switching. I see him hitting Floyd with something crazy, then Floyd tighten up his defense and winning on points. Very well could be that. We don't know. These guys are on another level, really. As I said, not really. Bud being catching and shooting his entire career. He did it against Spence and many other fighters. Like Floyd, he spars much bigger guys. Floyd has power, though. He's smaller than Bud. Yeah, he's physically smaller than Bud. He can catch and shoot, but it's more like take one to get one off of Floyd's defense. It's Gautier. Yeah, Floyd is the master. Crawford is a great champ, but not many tests. Still great. Mayweather beats many greats with ease. Pac, De La Hoya, Marquez, Canelo, Mosley, Corrales. Just adapts. He's the best. Um, no, man, Crawford got good defense, man. Don't get it twisted. He got good defense. He's got very good defense. You know, if Crawford don't want to get touched, he don't get touched. He didn't get touched against Errol Spence. Got good defense. Floyd, he's a far better boxer. If you actually fought, you would see the difference in levels. Terrell Bushido Brown says, horrible matchup for Floyd, arguably the worst. Terrell Bushido Brown, shout out to Terrell Bushido. John LeParry says, Crawford just learned defense a few fights ago. What are you talking about, bro? Crawford's always been a defensive fighter. Arguably, his most defensively responsible fights have been against Spence and Canelo. Before the Spence fight, he used to drop his hands during exchanges. Floyd would sniff out his technical mistakes from a mile away. I was like, what? Well, don't you understand? The most defensively responsible fight of Crawford's career was against Spence. That's the fight where he pretty much kept his earmuffs on the entire time. Before that, Crawford was pretty wild and wild during exchanges and dropped his hands. He became way more defensively responsible recently. This is so wrong. Trying to remember his name. I just can't remember it right now. I can't remember his name for some reason. I can't remember his name. Oh, let me see if I can get it. Terrence Bud Crawford, man. I'll get it, don't worry. Ricky Burns. Y'all need to watch Terrence Crawford versus Ricky Burns. Man has defense. He's aggressive, but he got defense. I don't know what you're talking about, bro. Okay, let's just keep it moving here. I think Bud style would be a problem for Mayweather. Not saying he would necessarily win, but anybody could do it. It would be Bud. I agree. Come on, you gotta be kidding. At this age, Bud, we're not talking about an actual fight. Marcus Walker says, "Stop it." No, it's fun to think of fantasy fights. It's part of fans' fun in boxing. Loosen up, have some fun. So this guy didn't want me to match. Let the two guys be great. No, ask anyone else what to do, what they want Bud to do because he's embarrassed. What does that have to do with anything? This is a fantasy fight between Bud and Money May. It's a logical question to ask given Bud's performance by fight fans. Loosen up. And it's prime Floyd for sure. Okay. Garbage. Bud too fresh. Floyd hasn't been active. We're not talking about an actual fight now, my friend. You do realize this is a fantasy fight, right? Yes, I do. I mean, no disrespect. If you do, then you wouldn't have said that stupid stuff. Now you do. Good. So now Crawford's letting Floyd beat him. Whoa, what? Somebody wants some attention, Floyd. Stop trying to leech off of some of the fame Bud is getting. That made no sense. Tucker, Damon Page, not even real. Well, obviously it isn't. We're just fantasizing about what would happen if they match up. Loosen up and have some fun. It's sport, and having fun is part of it. Stop being so uptight. Now I'm just ensuring Bud gets his run. How's that being uptight when I tickle about it? You're a boxing fan, not a defender of a fighter who does not need you to protect him. He can do it quite well on his own. Have fun with the sport. Okay. Crawford, unfortunately, Floyd has been out too long. We're not talking about an actual fight, man. Be betting on Bud. Okay. This went from a boxing group to a racist group and now fantasy boxing. What did that have to do with? See, some people, they take everything so personal. So fantasy boxing ain't boxing all of a sudden. Loosen up. Stop being so uptight. Nothing's racist about matching up the best of different eras. For crying out loud, we're playing boxing video games where we match up whoever. Like, I don't understand these guys, man. It's the best versus the best. It's whatever you think. If this has nothing to do with, clearly, we don't know who would win if Floyd and Terrence Crawford were to fight one another. We don't know. Honestly, Terrence Crawford's undefeated. Nobody knows how to beat Terrence Crawford. Floyd Mayweather's undefeated. Nobody knows how to beat Floyd. So the fun in this is putting the best of one era against the best of another. Boxing's about the best versus the best. It's a versus sport. Hello. So we're not denigrating or putting down Floyd or Crawford by saying what would happen if these two greats were to face each other. Okay, and different people are going to have different opinions. Now, what is disgraceful or what is disrespectful is if you now go and start telling lies about a fighter to try and diminish them to make another fighter look better. There's nothing wrong with competition and competition among Black people, right? Everybody says Michael Jordan's the GOAT in basketball. That's what they say. Because when you compare Michael Jordan to any other basketball player in basketball, they think he's the best, right? You have to compare. It's a versus thing, okay? So, I mean, that's what competition's about. So why is it that you should never do that. You should just respect them. But the sport is about boxing. It's versus. And they probably never will fight one another. Maybe they will in an exhibition. That would be fun. But at the end of the day, Terrence Crawford's fantasy fight is himself versus Floyd Mayweather. And that makes sense because he idolizes Floyd Mayweather. He sees Floyd Mayweather on a certain level. So obviously he's going to want to fight Floyd. Hey, if you really love a boxer and you're in boxing and you're a boxer yourself, you're not trying to avoid that boxer. You're trying to fight him. You're trying to share the ring with him. Okay? So it's obvious that Terrence Crawford loves Floyd Mayweather's style of boxing. He emulated himself after that. It's not a dishonor to face Floyd and fight him. Okay? And this is something, and plus you're getting a payday. This is not something, I don't understand why people especially certain fans, think that they need to protect fighters by saying, no, 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 this fighter should never fight that fighter. What's that have to do with anything? Boxing's not about not fighting one another. Boxing's about fighting one another. It's a fighting sport. So when you start telling me these stupid things like, oh, you want to get Floyd knocked out, and oh, you want to get Crawford knocked out, you want to see Crawford get beat, you want to see Floyd get beat. Listen, unless it's a ridiculous, unreasonable thing, then the matchup it's supposed to be what it is. I don't expect anybody to say, well, let's see Floyd fight Klitschko, or let's see Floyd versus, even though Floyd has opened the door to that by facing Mike Tyson, right? So he's kind of opened the door to that. But the point is, they're weight classes for a reason. But Terrence Crawford been in the same weight class as Floyd Mayweather. We don't say Floyd versus Marvin Hagler because Floyd's never been at 160. We talk about Floyd versus Thomas Hearns, and we talk about Floyd versus Sugar Ray Leonard. And the same hypocritical fans will say, oh, well, Sugar Ray Leonard would beat Floyd, or Thomas Hearns would beat Floyd, right? Y'all come out and say that, even though Thomas Hearns got multiple losses, been knocked out. Sugar Ray Leonard has multiple losses, been out, been stopped. But y'all still pick them over Floyd, even though they come an era before Floyd has seen them and everything. Now, I've said this to you guys, and I think, another guy who talked about this, a boxer from Philadelphia, I forgot what his name is right now. I was watching him in an interview, and he basically echoed the same sentiments I've been saying for a very long time. I've always said that boxing as a sport evolves. And whether you like it or not, the knowledge base in boxing is much bigger than the knowledge base in boxing from way back when. And I did a series on that and so on. And the more you see outstanding fighters fight, is the more you learn from them. So, back in the day, like I said before, I've said this many times, the way how boxers fought was different to the way how boxers fight today. It was much more basic. Now boxers today have several different ways to beat fighters. Several different ways. And there are blueprints on how to beat a particular style. So, and a specific style of a specific fighter. So when you guys tell me, well, Joe Louis would beat, Alexander Usyk, I laugh. The knowledge that Alexander Usyk has now, right? I mean, Joe Louis, he ain't got that knowledge. They will say, well, Joe Louis, if he was training today, you can't say that. You don't know how he would perform. How he performed with the style he had back in the day when he had his style, it was great for that period. You don't know what would happen if he was to be translated into this period and how he would perform. You don't know. You really don't. That's an unknown, right? And so Joe Louis, as Joe Louis is, versus Alexander Usyk, as Alexander Usyk is, Alexander Usyk wipes the floor with that dude and probably stops him. Okay? Because the knowledge difference, the difference in knowledge of boxing and the technology and all of that changes up the game completely. Boxing today is more of a mental game than it was back then. Boxers today don't take unnecessary risks, yes, but they go for it still, but they keep themselves defensively responsible in every single kind of way, on so many different levels now. It's just so many different ways to bring about defense while you are mounting your offense. And the guys of yesteryear, they may have knew one or two or three of these things, or they may even have understood it to a certain simplistic degree, But in terms of advanced tactics and advanced strategies we have today, it's just different. It really is. The knowledge pool and the knowledge base is different. So, and then, having defensive fighters, lead every single era, but add to the knowledge base of what's happening as people progress onwards and onwards is what pushes the sport forward. I'm trying to remember his name. It's just not coming to me. Javon M. Ferguson says, respectively, prime Floyd Mayweather at 135 to 147 without point Bud. Pot shot him to death, stick that jab in his face, buddy. Make Bud pay for trying to engage and press the fight. Floyd's footwork, defense reflects his shoulder roll, head movement, and counterpunching would get him a majority decision. I mean, that's a take. I'm gonna tell you this though. Terrence Crawford ain't no slouch. And he has certain physical attributes which Floyd will have to. He will be using his physical attributes. He will be using that jab. He will be using that southpaw stance. He will be using his footwork. You know, you make it sound like Floyd's the only one with footwork. No, Terrence Crawford's also got footwork. And so I think this would be one of the toughest fights of Floyd's career as well. You know, and Floyd will have to be an aggressor at certain points in time. Terrence Crawford is usually naturally the aggressor, but that doesn't mean he can't fight off the back foot and loves to engage as well. And I'm telling you right now, those looping shots Terrence Crawford throws, they're gonna be a problem for Floyd initially in the fight. He gonna make adjustments to it, but that's gonna be a problem. He gonna get hit with those looping shots. Bud, 12-round decision. That's a reasonable answer. Mayweather still has it. Okay. They both are already winners who are the GOAT of their eras. We know that. That's cool. Who you think would win and why? Money May or Pretty Boy Floyd? I said Money May. I mean, come on now. Omaha. All right. Floyd going to neutralize whatever the fuck his strength is and dictate pace, distance, and cruise to a split. That's not easier said than done, my friend. To dictate distance, the advantages with Crawford in terms of reach, but it depends on how Floyd goes about neutralizing Crawford's reach and also neutralizing his jab. If he can neutralize his jab, because Crawford does also throw these, like I said, these looping kind of shots that, you know, this is the stuff that boxers have difficulty with, because I might start looping a shot and then straighten it out and throw it as a jab. You know, so it forced Floyd to have to time that thing, which Crawford does fight in a rhythm, so that might be able to be done. But the question is, could he kind of out navigate it? Because Crawford has a weird way of throwing punches when he's ready. You know, he can throw them, he can shoot them straight, he can shoot them, you know, like a typical boxer. But then he can also loop them. He likes to generate power, so he'll whip his shots, which is going to be very interesting to see how Floyd deals with that. Wizard said, if they fight right now, Bud will win any half-decent. Floyd Mayweather wins with ease, ring generalship, IQ, boxing technique, defensive ability, experience, better amateur background, Olympic pedigree, natural born, more gifted, hard worker, in my opinion. Just a hypothetical, nothing the real. May is retired now. Okay, so he thinks Floyd. Let me hear your thoughts. Me, no, I just threw it out there for your reaction. No answer is wrong because no one ever solved either of their styles. So who you like is how I see it. Me personally, I believe in boxing as a sport evolves, so I would pick Bud, but I'm not really fully certain about that result. Again, Floyd has never been beaten, and he confessed he never really fought at his game game. So, you know, it's like arguing who would win between Pernell and Floyd. That's really hard to definitively say. Pernell moving backwards in a circle was unbeatable. You got to get him to come to you to beat him. Floyd's defense and adaptability was unreal, which is why he's very difficult to beat. You know, these are fights that are really difficult with 100% certainty to predict. Ain't no way Pernell Whitaker can beat Floyd. I have to disagree with Bud edging it over Floyd. He hasn't got a better defense and footwork. I feel that that's where the fight will be won. Do you think Crawford has a better resume than Floyd also? That's your opinion, which is valid at anyone, because we will never know for sure. But once again, if Pernell is moving backwards in a circle, he's unbeatable. I don't care what style you employ, his movement was never decoded. When Felix Trinidad beat him, he became aggressive, moved forward. Oscar never beat him. The judges gifted him that decision. I never saw Pernell lose a fight moving backwards in a circle as he does. We all know he beat Chavez too. I'm just saying, if Floyd was to beat him, he would have to somehow draw him forward and bait him into attacking him. Pernell had losses on his record, but the only true loss was against Tito. He decided to fight Tito aggressively, coming forward, claiming he was going to try to KO him. There are several reasons why I argue Crawford would beat Mayweather. One, he really loved Mayweather's style and therefore patterned his career after Mayweather's in terms of preparation, work ethic, mindset, defense, consistency, conditioning, and competitiveness. He has the IQ, youth, skills, physical attributes, and mindset to beat Mayweather. He has been watching and studying Mayweather ever since he was a child. He applied the same dedication to the sport that Mayweather had. It takes someone who really loves a great fighter and follows the lifestyle and discipline of a great fighter to beat a great fighter. Leonard was beaten by Terry Norris because Terry Norris idolized Leonard. Joe Louis was beaten by Marciano because Marciano loved and idolized Joe. Joe Kazaki beat Roy Jones Jr. because he loved Roy, and I can go on and on. As much as Crawford does not have a lot of wrinkles in his game as Mayweather does, and would learn a lot fighting him, I believe if there was anyone who could beat Floyd throughout boxing history, it would be Crawford. As to resume, clearly, if we're talking depth, that's hands down Floyd. Floyd finally got his big break fighting Oscar at 30. This made him the cash cow and face of boxing, allowing him to get big fights and big names throughout the rest of his career. He had to leave Top Rank to make that happen. For Terence Crawford, he has now reached that level at 37, beating Canelo. Once again, he had to leave Top Rank to make that happen. While he beat Spence, and that was like his Mayweather versus Arturo Gatti fight, which stamped that he was pound for pound king, his status as the face of boxing is now here after beating Canelo clearly. He's now where Floyd was after beating Oscar. Now, he will not have trouble getting the big fights he just couldn't get before because fighters were avoiding him as fighters were avoiding Pretty Boy Floyd. In terms of personal achievements, he is in his own sphere in men's boxing. He's the only three-weight class undisputed boxer in the three-belt or four-belt eras. When it gets historic is that he skipped an entire weight class and fought the face of boxing to gain his third undisputed title. While his first undisputed run was not as impressive as the other two, he fought no pound-for-pound fighters to become undisputed, even though Postal was a great win. He definitely did more work collecting all the belts by fighting many championship unification fights to get to that point, unlike with Spence and Canelo. Now, he has the opportunity to create history in becoming a four-time undisputed, which will set him apart from any boxer in boxing history, as no boxer has ever become undisputed in four weight classes in any era. So in terms of certain accomplishments, Floyd has done more than Floyd. In others, he's done less. He will never have as many championship wins as Floyd, nor as many world champs or Hall of Famers as Floyd faced in his resume, though no fault of his. But he's already had 3 or more undisputed titles than Floyd, and may even have the most when all is said and done in boxing history. Money May, too accurate, the best defense. He really has a hell of a defense. Bud, says Russell Mosley. Crawford has the reach and size advantage with Floyd's athleticism and speed. Floyd never fought anybody with a longer reach. I got Bud. I've always said that. Not just after 2 weeks ago. So I said, I don't know about that. Oscar De La Hoya had a longer reach, was at a higher weight class, and was taller. Shane Mosley was a taller, longer guy. Both Oscar and Mosley were quick, light-footed, speedy guys who had power and threw a lot of combos. Then Floyd also fought a guy who was his mirror image, but bigger, taller, faster, more powerful, and longer than him in Zab Judah. He also fought Diego Corrales, who was 6 feet tall with a 73-inch reach. So it's false that Floyd did not face guys longer, taller, and stronger with more power, and even way more than him on Fight Night. So Richie Gray said false. Corrales had a 70-inch reach, Mosley 71, Zab 72, Spence 72, Oscar 73. Oscar was the only one with a longer reach. An older Oscar at that, who isn't the athlete that Bud is. Bud has a 74-inch reach. So I had to correct him. Nah, brah, those are false stats. On Fight Night, when Floyd faced Diego Corrales, his fight stats showed that he was 6 feet tall with a 73-inch reach on HBO. This was HBO After Dark, and you can see the stats right there. I just took it from YouTube. I just snapped the photo, and there it is right there. Okay? So, dude saying that Diego Corrales had a 70-inch reach, that is false. That's the tail of the tape right there. Also, Diego Corrales came into that fight at super featherweight. He was weighing the weight of a welterweight, as you can see there. So he was a big dude. When Floyd faced Mosley, according to HBO pay-per-view, he was 5'9", as you can see right there. Tail of the tape. Now, they didn't have reach there. They had arm length. I'll tell you the difference between reach and arm length a little later. While arm length is not really used. Now, they say that Mosley's arm length was shorter than Floyd's arm length. Okay. But Mosley actually, remember, arm length is from your shoulder to the tip of your fist. That's your arm length. The thing about it is, though, whether Mosley had a shorter arm length or not is irrelevant because we still are not measuring from the tip of the shoulder to the tip of the neck. There's also that, and that's part of your reach. So your reach goes it's from your fingertips to your fingertips when you put your hands out horizontally. And why they use reach instead of arm length is because the reach involves the distance between your neck and your shoulders, as well as also sometimes the center of your neck to your shoulders. Because when you put your arm out, you're actually going from the center of your neck to your shoulders. All of that can go out there. And why we do the tip of the finger is because usually when you reach out and you start shooting a shot, you lean in to your opponent. So you actually are, it's almost like you extended your fingers. Your reach kind of more typifies the actual ability of you to hit your opponent. And it's generally your reach is double your, if you were to reach with a normal arm. So this is why we talk about reach. Because sometimes you're stepping in and all these kinds of things. So that it caters for all of that. I also go on to tell them that, okay, Mosley is 5'9". That's the same height as Terrence Crawford. And I said, when Mosley first faced Oscar De La Hoya, he was 5'9" with a 74-inch reach, as you can clearly see there, which is the same as Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford is 5'9" with a 74-inch reach. So this is why I said Mosley had a longer reach and was taller than Floyd Mayweather. With Zab Judah, I said I was wrong about Zab's height. He was slightly shorter than Floyd, but he was the bigger guy in the ring. They did not show the reach, but the arm length, which is different to reach. Zab fought at welter for 6 fights when he faced Floyd. So you're being at welterweight for 6 fights. This was Floyd's second fight at welter. He had been the undisputed champ the fight before losing it to Baltimore. I also noticed that he was also the heavier guy in there. He was a little shorter than Floyd. He was 5'7". But he did have similar reach to Floyd, as I will show you here. Here is his reach with the Costa Tszyu fight. Zab Judah, when facing Costa Tszyu, had a recorded reach of 72 inches, equal to Floyd Mayweather's reach. So the guy was right. Zab had a 72-inch reach, so they had similar reaches. Okay. All right now. Floyd never faced Errol Spence, so I don't know why you brought him up. As you already saw, Oscar De La Hoya, when he faced Mosley the first time, had a 73-inch reach and was recorded as having a height of 5'10.5". Oscar's height is confirmed with the De La Hoya versus Mayweather fight, proving once again that its dimensions are as in the Oscar versus Mosley one fight. Reach is the distance from the tip of the middle finger in one hand to the middle finger in the other, measured horizontally, whereas arm length is the distance from the shoulders to the fist. Why reach is used is because sometimes when you are jabbing, you use more than the distance from the shoulders to the fist to reach your opponent. Reach involves that distance beyond the shoulders to the fist, including the distance from the shoulders to the neck. And here you see Oscar De La Hoya is 5'10.5". And just in case you might have forgotten what Oscar's reach was, here he is here with his reach. It's a 73-inch reach. Okay. Notice also Shane Mosley, when he fought Oscar De La Hoya, was 155 pounds, whereas Oscar De La Hoya was 152. So Mosley was the heavier guy there. And they didn't say what Mosley's weight was for the Mayweather fight on the night. They give you the official weights. Floyd was 146, Mosley was 147. I'm assuming that Mosley, coming out fight night, was 150-something pounds, maybe even 160-something pounds, and Floyd was probably 148, 47, something like that, because Floyd stayed on weight. In summary, given the evidence above, Floyd faced Corrales, 6'3" with a 73-inch reach, taller than Crawford, 5'9" with a 74-inch reach. Mosley, 5'9" with a 74-inch reach, same as Crawford. Zab Judah, 5'7" with a 72-inch reach, similar to Floyd's reach. Oscar, 5'10.5" with a 73-inch reach, who was taller than Crawford, all of whom had reaches either equal to or greater than himself. Mosley actually having exactly the same dimensions as Crawford. What you said was false and continues to be false. By the way, Floyd was 5'8" with a 72-inch reach. Have a good day. So, as I said before, Floyd had faced fighters with a longer reach than him, or equal to the reach with him. There's also Gennaro Hernandez, who was 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. So he's fought longer, taller guys at the championship level, guys who were world champions like Zab Judah, Mosley, Corrales, De La Hoya, and then you have Gennaro Hernandez, who was 5'11" or 5'10", I can't remember, with a 72-inch reach. So he had fought guys who were taller than him, bigger than him, longer than him, faster than him, stronger than him, more power than him. He had fought all those guys. But ultimately, in the end, he was smarter than them all, and he was able to beat them all. And that's the point. So the guy was saying that, Floyd had never fought somebody with a longer reach than him. That's not true. That's very, 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 very false. In fact, just to bring things even more to the fore, if you look at, Terrence Crawford's dimensions, Floyd actually fought somebody with dimensions like Terrence Crawford. So I thought I would share that there. Okay, let's go back. Oops, I don't know what I just did, but I'm sure I can come back to it and do my thing. So, Pofu says, I'm going with Bud in the fantasy matchup. He is hot right now, so I get you on that. My argument is Bud has seen and studied and copied aspects of Floyd's game. The guys who truly love and appreciate and take attributes of very successful fighters generally get better than them. So based on your argument that boxing as a sport has evolved, I would have to agree. But Floyd is a clever boxer. So I'm very sure that it wouldn't be an easy fight to win, and we could very well be very wrong, as Bud has never lost, and no one has ever solved his puzzle he presented to them. So we don't know really who definitively would win that, but it's a very interesting fight. Stephen Claiborne says T Bud versus a TBE. Yeah, man, that's pure fire. I know. This is boxing, not track. It would be considered cross country, and he laughs. Just the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't know about all that, I said. And Ron Neal says, you really make that haterism look good. Yeah. So I thought I would just share this before I go into what Bud has on the cards for the future. For the cards for the future, we saw Bud at the Ring magazine put out a video where Bud gave Turkey Al-Sheikh his gloves that he fought Canelo with, his winning gloves. And Turkey Al-Sheikh is saying that they got some really big surprises coming up with Bud for you guys, but they gotta wait like a month, 2 months before they can actually break the news to the public. I believe it has to do with Bud going down to 160 and fighting at 160 and probably looking to unify all the titles down at 160. Now, out of all those perspectives, there's also the Bud versus Jerome Boots Ennis. So that might be another thing that maybe Boots comes up to 160 and fights Bud. Maybe Bud becomes undisputed and then takes on Boots Ennis, or maybe Bud takes on Boots Ennis first and then he goes on to take on. But I think it would be better if he took on championship fights and then had a championship fight with Boots Ennis, and maybe Boots prepares for that. Or it could be that David Benavidez has changed his mind and decided to fight Terrence Bud Crawford, but maybe that's down the road. Maybe Terrence, goes down, becomes undisputed at 160, and then takes on David Benavidez for his 175 title, because he's also undisputed at 168. Maybe either they fight at a catch weight of 168, or maybe they fight the fight at 168, and Bud could win. Kind of like what Andre Ward did with what's his name? I forgot what his name is, the 175-pound champion. Maybe something like that. I don't know what's going to go on, but it looks like it's going to be something that really is going to excite the fans. It's going to be a big fight. I don't know what it could be. Okay, I really don't know what it could be, but it must involve either 160. Bud's not going down to 154. That's those days are over. His body's outgrown that. So we're looking at probably 160 and Bud fighting at 160 and probably becoming undisputed. That would be great. Or it could be that Bud is probably going to become undisputed and maybe take on either Boots Ennis, or it could be he fights, Jamal Charlo maybe. Jamal Charlo's a big 168, and Jamal Charlo's undefeated. So we don't know what it could be. It could be he faces Turkey Al Sheikh's guy, the guy that um, stopped the kid from Puerto Rico. I forgot what his name is. So it could be anything. It could be any one of those factors. We don't know really what it's going to be, but it's going to be something good that the fans going to love. Crawford has given us now two really big fights. And if Crawford's going to do a fight, it's got to be big. From here on in, it's just got to be a big fight. It's got to be a fight that makes the fans say, "Oh my God, I want to see this fight." So maybe it's a Boots fight. Who knows what it could be? Boots was the IBF 147 champion. Boots is going to be taking on a fighter at 154, and then I think he's going to fight. You know, Probably Virgil Ortiz at 154, which would be great. But still, Boots is Boots has to speed up and try and get some things done quickly. If he ever is going to be something that fans want to see against Terrence Crawford. And the problem with Boots is Boots and Virgil Ortiz, they are two. What's the word I'm looking for? Did Virgil become a world champion? I think he became a world champion at 147. I'm not sure. Boots has been a world champion, but it's hard to get Boots versus Crawford just like that. You know what I'm saying? Boots hasn't done much in his career to start with. And when he had to step up and be tested by a guy who could box, he had difficulty with him. And Crawford's a guy that could box, and he's also aggressive with it. So I don't know how well Boots will be able to deal with that and handle that, at the end of the day. So we'll see. But yeah, I think that Crawford is going to more than likely go down to 160 and unify 160. And it looks like he may be facing, the best of 160. So we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, that's what I've got for you guys. I am what you need. No, there was one more thing I want to follow up on, which is again the Popo in Omaha, Nebraska. So of course I didn't talk about this, but in All the Smoke podcast with Andrew Ward, Terrence Crawford talked about how the police always would stop him very regularly, in Omaha. But I don't know if the police ever pointed a gun at him like that. So, and regardless of whether they did it before or not, this is one of those times where they better stop doing that. Okay. And Crawford, I've seen Crawford, bully guys who, try to, Crawford don't take no shit from nobody. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that Crawford is always, nonviolent or passive guy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that when he is violent, he's not violent for a reason. But what I am saying is that Terrence Crawford, from everything I'm seeing on social media and all I'm gathering, he was very unfairly stopped. And it seemed like the officer who pulled the gun on him was about to use excessive force on him for no reason at all. And we can't have that happening in society. And I heard Timothy Bradley talking about his experience with the police and that he was wrong most of the times when he did it. But that's California police. That's not Nebraskan police, okay? I've also had interactions with California police. I think once I went through a red light. I tend to go through red lights when I'm driving. I've gotten so many tickets from it that I had to pay. But anyway, so when the officer told me that I went through a red light, it was late in the night. I've been stopped by the police maybe 3 times when I was in California, maybe 3 or 4 times. But for the most part, I didn't get stopped by the police. But the times when I got stopped, I think, oh, there was another time I was stopped by, what you call him? Um, One of those officers, a traffic, like traffic trooper or whatever his name is. I keep on seeing stormtrooper in my mind, but one of those officers, which, they police the freeways, and they ran my plates and everything. I actually pulled to the side of the road and fell asleep, and an officer saw me, and he told me, well, there was a resting stop X amount of miles down the road. So I took my Honda and I drove down there. Um, and Police officers tend to stop you if you have maybe a very expensive vehicle and they want to check out the vehicle and stuff like that. But me personally, I've been followed a couple times by officers, but it's usually in Loma Linda. San Bernardino is right next door as well. I've been followed by cops. Sometimes I get annoyed when I see them, or they bleep their lights and ask me to pull over. And I've been stopped more than often. I think there's a lot of people. I understand the racial profiling thing. I don't like being stopped by cops all the time and having to show my students that I was a student of a university and my ID and stuff. But I did it. They never asked me to come out of their car. They never asked me that. They were always very polite. That was something that I noticed. I don't really like police pulling up on me, but they generally were very polite. And They would ask for specifics X, Y, and Z, and then they'd go on their way. So I never really had, except for being harassed a couple of times by police. Police stopped me. I think there was a time when I went down to some place and I was observing, I think the boats, I think it was Newport Beach, a housing area there. And I was looking at the yachts and stuff, and me and my ex at the time, and an officer came and told me I couldn't stop there and watch the stuff or something like that. And I said, Isn't this not a public property? Isn't this road a public road?" And it was like, "No, this is a private road. This is a private establishment." And I was like, "What? Okay, okay." I just left. I didn't bother. But I think it was public property, and I think I didn't see any reason why I couldn't be there. But who knows? Maybe it was public road. I don't know. But the point is, in California, it's not as bad. At least I don't know. An officer actually saved my life a time. I was lost in LA, and I was somewhere. I'm not quite sure which part of LA I was. There was some railroad tracks there. Place was just messed up, and it was just like looked like I was in a drug-ridden thing. I was trying to get to the freeway, and thankfully, I ran into an officer, and I was asking, "Where is the freeway on this place? I just want to get on the freeway. I don't want to." And He was able to direct me to there. So, once again, I've had good and bad experiences with officers, but always the officers were very polite. They were willing to offer assistance. So that's why I said the majority of police officers. Uh, um, I've never had a negative interact. Again, it could be because I was a university student. The only thing is they would follow you a lot, especially at certain hours. Now, I am a very, very smart guy. So let me explain to you something. I knew how to minimize police following me and tracking me and tracing me down. I minimized that. And I'll tell you this because I'm telling you this because there was a time when I actually was breaking the law. I'm going to say this on social media, but I was breaking the law because I was homeless. So I figured out there are places where police just won't go. So I figured out how to outmaneuver them because, while I was breaking the law, let me explain what I mean. For example, in the United States of America, for example, you cannot, it's called jaywalking. If you stay in one spot too long, you're jaywalking, right? And I was homeless. So I had to sleep somewhere. All right. And you can't just sleep any old place. They have homeless shelters for that. But I didn't want to go into a homeless shelter because I saw how things were there. So I found a place, and the place was on the road, but it was outside of the usual place where police patrol. They don't go in that area. And then I found another thing, which I thought was brilliant. I found a way to get into a space. It was a church space, but I would move there like 3 o'clock in the morning. I would make my move. I knew how to read traffic lights. I knew how the police patrolled. I saw how regularly they did their patrols. So I was able to time them. And I would do my thing and I'd go to this church building. Again, this is illegal what I was doing because I was going into the compound. I was trespassing. And I remember a neighbor and their dog starting to bark, and the neighbor turned on their lights to see what was going on. But obviously, I moved through the shadowy area. I moved through the darkness. And the nice thing about that was the place was near a freeway. So the freeway sort of drowned out any sound that would happen. It was very, very cold, by the way. So I was able to outmaneuver police. I knew how to outmaneuver police. I used to look at cameras. I knew where cameras were. I knew how to read cameras. I knew how to move across cameras to make yourself look kind of normal, even though I looked anything but normal. And I knew how to keep cover. What I mean by that is there are also campus police. You have students who are police. There are all kinds of police. So to sort of move among them as if you're a normal student, which I was, and still at the same time, evade them. I learned the science of how to do that. So, so I was able to outmaneuver them for the most part. So yeah. So anyway, when it comes to the police, anyway, I'm trying to tell you. And let's say you're dealing with police in a place like Nebraska or a place like Tennessee or Texas or different places where police have, brutalized people, whether it be, in places like New Orleans, etc. What I've come to understand is that most police, the majority of police, generally speaking, do what they're supposed to do. Okay. But, and this is a big but, you have a significant portion of police officers who have no regard for the law. They think they are the law. All right. And these officers try to escalate situations. They don't try to calm down situations. They're not trying to calm down a situation. And it's the dumbest thing ever. So they literally work against the code of policing. I've seen it in my country. I've seen it elsewhere. Almost all police behave the same way with certain situations. Okay. The thing about it is, shoot first, ask questions later just doesn't work. You can't be killing people, especially innocent people. You can't be doing that. And then saying, oh, it's my bad. No. And it's a very serious thing. So, of course, police have non-lethal ways of also dealing with people. And then there are officers who abuse that. The police officer who killed George Floyd had his foot on his neck, had him handcuffed, and choked him out to death. And several incidents in the United States that has happened in Michigan, Detroit, in almost every state, police officers have done things like this. And this is way too common. All right. And it gives police a very bad name. It gives them a very bad reputation. And these officers, instead of being, criminally charged and either put behind bars or, having to pay enormous fines and also being completely removed from the police force. These people end up still working for the police in some other department. They're moved somewhere else. And usually they're still doing their policing. They're still on patrol for some reason. I don't know why. You just give them a fucking desk job and let them sit in a desk so they don't tamper with anyone. Some of these officers as well, they're fired from the police service and they end up doing security work, and they do the same shit when they become security officers. Okay? So you have to track down these people. And this is why, in order, and I know it sounds severe, but it's not really. In order for police officers to respect and understand they're servants of the law, they're there to enforce it. They're not there to make it on people. There must be consequences for it. If you've committed murder as a police officer, and I mean intentional, with the intent to kill, and the person gave you an excuse and you killed them, that's murder. Okay, that's murder one. That's premeditated murder. You shouldn't be allowed to just serve in the police service, be suspended or whatever, get some of your pay cut, and so on. I think that some officers get special privileges and they abuse these privileges as officers. And they know it's very difficult for a police officer to be tried on murder or a murder case, murder one particularly, in the line of duty, because he shot somebody and killed him. They know this. And the other thing that's very interesting is that when you talk about military people or even police officers, they tend to have domestic violence or rape or something like that going on in their personal lives, these kinds of officers. So, and these officers, generally speaking, they're in some way or form corrupt officers as well. So, all of these things are very important for people to understand when we are talking about this kind of officer. I'm not saying that there's a majority of police officers. The majority of police officers, while conditioned some of them to be racist, while conditioned to be biased against certain kind of people who come from certain areas as well. If you carry out protocol, that is to say, you treat everybody according to protocol and not according to abuse of the law or abuse of protocol, you generally speaking are a good officer. Generally, you want to work together with the community. Generally speaking, you want to help citizens and help them out, right? And I have encountered police officers like that in the States. I've also encountered police officers here in my own home country like that. But they're not all like that, okay? And as a significant portion of the police service, who involve themselves in a very, very, very criminal behavior against communities and groups of people. And I pray God I don't have to cross paths with some officers like that, but with communities and people who they deem as corrupt or whatever. And I have a problem with that. I do severely have a problem with that kind of policing. I feel like you must follow certain protocols when you're a police officer. And most of those protocols do not demand violence or violent action. I do believe there are the seasoned police officers, just like the seasoned school teachers, who you just have to look at them and you know you need to stay in line. You know what I'm saying? They got that presence. And you have to be an officer like that. You have to be a good leader, and you have to also be someone who you know not to fuck around with this person when they come to you. You feel that, you get that sense initially. A lot of things we as human beings do is nonverbal, right? It's how we carry ourselves. And if you're an officer, you have to take certain precautions when you carry yourself a certain way. And the other problem is you have to have support from other officers to cover your ass, cover your back. If they're not about covering your back, you could be killed in the line of duty. But the officers who are present, the officers who are communicable with the public, you can command the public's respect and still communicate with them. You know what I'm saying? And it's all about respect at the end of the day. Now, anybody's out of line that in any way harms you as an officer, the community has your back. Like, what the fuck? Who the fuck would go and try and do something to Sergeant whatever? You know what I mean? Because they're going to have your back. And so that is why it's very important. When you hear people talk about the Popo and they have these negative sentiments about law enforcement officers, it's because of the significant amount of law enforcement officers who violate the law, have no respect for people, and they think they're a law unto their own selves. They make it harder for the public to respect those who enforce the law. Because if those people don't even regard the law as important, how the fuck can they enforce it, right? So that is the problem. As an officer of the law who is there to execute it, it's very important that police officers understand that. And you can say that their job is dangerous. Guess what? Almost every job today is dangerous. Once you step out there, you're a target, especially if you're a business person. You're a target, okay? And there are business people who arm themselves, but that obviously does not keep you from not getting attacked, right? It's how you carry yourself. I always try to explain to people, The greatest deterrent is the way how you behave. How you behave lets people know, oh, he's a good target. Because most of the time, the criminal elements who want to rob or steal someone, they're studying their options. And just like wild animals in the wild, they're looking for the easiest option to rob or steal or kill or murder, right? So if you don't make yourself a vulnerable target, an easy to access vulnerable target, plus you have a certain presence to you where these guys are thinking twice about even trying to fuck with you. You know what I mean? That makes a big difference. And that's the same thing with the officers of the law. It's how you carry yourself that it demands people respect you. And second of all, there's a lot of things and situations you could handle without even having to get to a violent solution. You know, I've seen an officer, he didn't pull his weapon. The criminal has a gun in his hand. And the officer behaves in a manner in which the criminal is intimidated by him, even though he hasn't drawn his weapon. It's highly intimidated by him because first, when the criminal tried to use his weapon, he realized it was ineffective. It was ineffective against the officer. The officer was able to navigate past that weapon. The officer never drew his weapon, even though the criminal used his weapon. The officer never used his weapon. And because the officer knew how to neutralize the criminal without using a weapon. After the criminal used his weapon and fired his weapon on the officer, he realized he made the biggest mistake of his life because the officer closed that distance so fast and had that guy on the ground in pain and secured before you could say boo. He learned very quickly this was not one of those officers you could fuck with a gun. The gun gives you no power against that officer. That officer knew how to fight, and he was a tactical officer. So, dude had one chance to fire off the shot. The officer was coming at him, took him out. Dude was not able to hit the officer, and the officer took him down, and that was that, right? And all I'm saying is, a lot of criminals out here think that they have power because they have firearms. And you may know how to shoot a firearm properly, but there are also people who can neutralize that. Once that criminal was apprehended, of course, all the other criminals were running away. They didn't stick around because they're cowards, right? They were all armed, but they were running away and the police was in pursuit of them. And the funny part about this was that one officer made all those criminals run away from him. They were intimidated by the fact that he had presence, that he knew what he was doing, that he knew how to handle the situation without using a firearm, without using a taser, without using any other intricacies except his two hands. And the officer, without punching, without hitting the other guy, was able to neutralize him rather quickly and secure him. And I thought that was quite amazing when I saw it. And I do believe that police officers can do much better than they're doing today. A lot of them are lazy. A lot of them don't want to put in the work, both in terms of physical work to get their bodies into prime shape, and two, in terms of the knowledge of combat and interactions. Of all officers who should know boxing and know martial arts, it's the tactical boxers, tactical officers. They should know combat. They should be, if needed as a resort, they should be able to use combat. And just by looking at them, you should be able to say, I don't want to fuck with this guy. Okay? That's the way it should be. I think that police officers and officers of the law, they should be versed in these kinds of situations. They should be versed in this. They should be versed in confrontation, in combat, how to deal with confrontation, how to deal with confrontation issues. What's the smartest way to approach someone who you're not very sure if they're armed or not armed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're in pursuit of someone, what is the best way to pursue them that's not as obvious? How to set traps, and so on and so on. I think that police officers could make their work so much easier if they would be calm. A calm officer, not super calm, like not overly calm, but a calm officer can process things much faster, can take action much quicker. Um, and so, to me, to be honest with you, if I'm dealing with any situation, I don't care who they are, what race they are, whatever, I don't care. I try to approach it calmly because anything happens, I want to be able to make the best possible decision I could possibly make given that scenario. And yes, officers who are on the streets dealing with criminal elements, they put their lives on the line, just as, you know, say a fighter would put his life on the line when he's fighting. But at the same time, this isn't about adrenaline rushes. This is about managing yourself, your emotions, your time, and making sure that you're in the best possible physical and mental shape you possibly could be in to deal with any particular situation. So then when you go home to your family, you're a much more responsible person. You value life instead of thinking of life as this flippant thing where some people's lives are valuable and some people's lives are not. This is the problem we have with the policing in certain parts of the country, my country and worldwide, and why policing is probably not the best way to go when you have to deal with criminal elements. This is probably something better out there that, because people always feel that human beings need officers or police or enforcers to keep them in line. But let me ask you this. Most of our problems in society are as a result of people trying to cheat the system so that they could get benefits from it, right? If, for instance, we have a society where people are going to work where they live, pretty near where they live, you won't have traffic jams. You won't have people trying to break the line to go to a certain place or a certain venue. If you have better economic equity amongst people, where everyone can get things that they want and they're more or less satisfied, you again won't have this disparity which makes people resort to illegal means to want to earn something, right? You're going to still always have some people in society who will tend towards criminal elements and criminal living, and it has nothing to do with their upbringing. But that will be even less than it was before, right? Because a lot of times people are pushed into these situations because they don't have the currency, they don't have the money, and they don't have the will, they don't have the self empowerment to get up and make something happen for themselves. So they easily, because they're weak minded, they fall into whatever is around them. And that's how they learn business, and that's how they end up in underworld activities instead. So, you know, equity, economic equity breaks that problem. So, where do we need the policing then? Well, we won't need policing. What we will need more in a society like that, where everything's kind of pretty much there, is we would need probably, and especially if everybody can get a place to stay in, housing, affordable housing or subsidized housing. Once people have subsidized housing, once they can get food to eat, once they can buy whatever they like to buy and go to be entertained by whatever they want to be entertained in, and they can travel where they want to travel, you're very much going to have a society that most people are happy in, and therefore, because of that, you're not going to have that big level of crime. And you've seen it in European countries, you've seen it elsewhere, and some European countries actually, their police is almost non-existent because, again, people are pretty much content and satisfied with what is happening around them. So again, policing will not be necessary for those things. Policing is only there because you have an unfair system towards the majority of people. People are slaves. They have to go to work. They have to do jobs. They have to do these things. As a result of that, you end up with people now who don't have work, don't have jobs, disenfranchised, and looked down upon. And as a result, they resort to crime. You know, so that's what I've got for you guys there. I covered all the topics. I am what you need. I hope you guys have a good one.